What's going on, podcast listeners? My name is Michael Chernow. I am a restaurateur and lifestyle entrepreneur, and I am truly obsessed with living a life better than yesterday through wellness, fitness, and good vibes. I've always wondered if the drive to succeed is something we are born with, or if it's something that is made over time through grit, drive, and perseverance. I get to answer that question exactly, and the goal of this podcast is to talk with people that have absolutely crushed it in life and have inspired me to do the same. This is Born or Made. All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Born or Made podcast. Today, I am fired up to have a guest on that I've known for a really long time. He is one of the guys that I used to do crazy shit with back in the day in New York City. One of the only guys who actually knows me from my days of destruction, and I'm really excited to have Rob Cristofaro, co-founder of Alife New York City. Actually, the brand that started what we all think of today as New York City downtown culture. Three of his friends started a company called Alife in the late 90s in New York City. And I remember it like it was yesterday. It was the hardest place to get into, and it was a fucking sneaker shop. Honestly, it was a sneaker and clothing shop. You could not get in there unless you knew at least two people that were working there. I mean, you had to buzz in from the street. It was in the Lower East Side, when the Lower East Side was like in its prime. Rob, I am very excited to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, and I'm glad to sit down and talk. It's been a long time.
Yeah. So I'll just give you a quick rundown of Born or Made. This podcast was started about a year ago. I've had an opportunity to talk to some really, exceptional people, and I get people like you on the show who have inspired me and many others. You have definitely done that. You've inspired me for sure, and many, many, many others. The waves that you have made with what you've done in New York City culture, inspired brands like Supreme, right? Like Kith, like all the brands that have come after you have been inspired by Alife, and there's no doubt about that. And it's amazing that Alife is 22 years old and still crushing. So the idea is I get to speak with guys like you and guys and gals that have made waves, and then talk about your story and understand whether you were born with this crazy inherent ability to crush it at what you've done, or if you were made over time. I also do want to mention that I think your hustle probably started before Alife, definitely started before Alife, in the world of graffiti in New York City. You are, most people would say, an NYC king in the graffiti world, and I can only imagine the drive and the obsession to get to that level in graffiti in New York City. There's only a few people. I grew up in New York City, and I am younger than you, but I remember very clearly there was a few people that inspired me. It was Dondi, you, Med, and RD, DE3, and a few others, but really those are the ones that stood out for me growing up in Manhattan, and JA, of course. Yeah, so I would love to talk about all that shit, because I think it's so interesting and so much fun. So let's get into your story. I'd love to go as early or as far back as you can remember. And I'll probably interrupt you to sort of pick out moments that I think could potentially have put you in this born category.
I mean, I don't even know where should we start. At the beginning of the graffiti career was definitely a big learning experience. It starts off when you're young. You go through the whole creating this this name. It's basically, that's it. It's a lesson of brand building. you know? It's basically, say 14 years old is when I started. I'm 50 years old right now. I started Alife in 1999. The graffiti subculture was what I became wrapped up in as a kid. I did not know that there was even, you know, I didn't know about skateboarding. I did not know about any of that until I actually came to Manhattan to build the business of Alife. So, you know, graffiti was my network of people and talent that I, became family with. And it was crazy because really, like I said, like until I started Alife, really, I was not up on Supreme. Supreme actually started before Alife.
But it was just a skate. It was really a skateboard shop, right?
With,
Like,
so that whole crew, I didn't even realize that there was a whole nother, family. I didn't know it was such a big thing, which is how stupid I was, and caught up in the world that I was in. But yeah, graffiti is like any like any artist that you will talk with, or anyone that's become a lifelong veteran of it. I think like once you begin it, it's in your blood and you're done. Like I'm 50 years old and I still am constantly using elements, or using the infrastructure that I've learned. Because really, when I look back at it now, and I always say it, but it was really a lesson in branding. And that's why, like it's advertising at its base level, but it's the rawest form of it. And all of the all of the lessons and rules of graffiti are very much like what happens in advertising and outdoor media and all these companies that are huge companies. The only difference is that you're paying with money, not your blood, sweat, and tears, and everything else that you deal with in the graffiti world.
I want to understand though what it was like before graffiti and what you were like as a little kid, because you say you start at 14. Like I grew up in the city and I started writing graffiti when I was, I don't know, 12, but I never took to it the way you took to it. So there was something different between you and I, right? Where like there was an obsession there that you've obviously taken with you in other ventures in your life, that didn't exist in me. So I just want to know, was that prevalent in your life before graffiti or no?
I think that like I always had an affinity towards it. I always loved it. I always loved looking at it for whatever reason. I remember as a kid, coming in and out of Manhattan, up the West Side Highway, or up the East, the FDR Drive, and seeing RD and seeing all these people that were kind of there. It was for me, it was always the highways of New York that kind of like left a dent in my memory. That's the shit that I grew up on. And in graffiti, graffiti's broken down into all these different segments of, there's people that do pieces, there's people that painted trains. The era that I came up in, the trains were pretty much fizzled out. I was never interested in any of that. My interest was really strictly on the highways, and that those were the people that were prevalent at the time, that were doing these huge, or so many repetitive times that it just became ingrained. And so I have a lot of my icons in the graffiti world are bombing people, which is like, the bombers to me is like the base you know, the soldier of graffiti. It's like they don't give a fuck about spending a fucking, you know, creating a beautiful work of, you know, a mural. It's like, you know, it's like put this shit in the most booming spot that you can. And for me, it was always make it as readable as you can, where even if it's a damn old lady driving up the road, she's going to read it, you know, and understand what it is. So it was really just that. And a lot of that kind of translated into me building, you know, the branding of Alife, where it was like very bold, very big. You could see it from across the street if somebody had it on. Like, so a lot of these things came from that culture and that mindset of like how to do it. Just to get back to your question of before graffiti, I don't know if you know, I was always into art. My mother was not trained in art professionally or any of that, but she grew up painting and always doing art. I remember as a kid, I was born in 1970, so we were in the 70s, and in the 70s you had this, you know, love, peace vibes. Well, that was the 60s. In the 70s, it was this graphic kind of like graphic art. Like my mother used to paint these murals that were in our apartment, like it would be in our living room. It would be like very Espo-esque, where it's like, you know, rollers, but it would be like a thick line, a curve, you know, up the wall, around. So I was always surrounded by her kind of doing these like art, you know, from canvases to, you know, all different kind of stuff. So I kind of think that definitely influenced, you know, where my early stuff, and even down to like the graphicness of it, and her style kind of, you know, impacted me also. So a lot of the shit that I did was always very bold, very graphic, very, you know, not too intricate, but like technical and booming, you know, like clean.
You always had but like out of everyone that I can still remember, probably to this day, your style is very unique. Like there's not, when you look at something that you've done, there's very few. I don't think I can think of anyone who actually has consistently kept such a unique style and hasn't really changed it much. And it's still, every time you see it, you're like, wow, that shit is fly.
Yeah, it's you know, it's the people that follow, you know, graffiti culture, and it is a pretty niche family. It's a small, you know, it is a global community, but the real, you know, the real people that are in it, I think they respect, you know, what we did, which was, it was just bombing, but it was done right. You know, it was like everything was, you know, for 90% of the shit that I did, it was, you know, white and black, you know, Rust-Oleum white and black, just clean, plain, simple shit, you know, but booming, you know. And that was the one thing, a lot of people would meet me and be like, oh shit, you know, you're fucking small. Like I thought you were like fucking, you know, this big fucking, you know. So a lot of the shit, it's like, you know, graffiti is a mystery a lot of times, not now with the social media as much as it was, but, you know, before social media, it was like, you know, you remain anonymous as long as you can, and you fucking, that's what, you know, builds your career. Once people know who you are, know where to find you, you're done, you know, for the most part. So, you know, that was when my career ended. When I started Alife was basically the end of that career, but it totally flowed all of the same shit that I was interested in, just kind of flowed into this new name, which was Alife. And that was the new shit that I was bombing in different ways, you know, you know, there was no social media at the time that we created Alife. It was 1999. And, you know, our main vehicle for promoting ourselves, one of the main things was a magazine that we took in as a project called Mass Appeal. And at the time, Mass Appeal magazine was run by two kids, two graph kids. I don't even know where they were from, Patrick and Adrian. They weren't New Yorkers, but they had created this staple together. You know, in the graffiti world, you create these magazines. They had this zine called Mass Appeal. Before Alife, I was an art director. I dealt with the publishing world. So that was my first real job, was in publishing and in a magazine business. And I started as an intern and I worked there for 10 years and I became eventually a fucking art director, and I learned under very like old school people, you know, a French art director that came from the real publishing world, like fashion business. So he was like a fucking stickler. So I got this classic training from, you know, from this French. Then I had this Korean techie guy that went on to become very big at Wyden and Kennedy, which was all Nike's advertising, like a more modern designer. He was the art director's assistant. So these are the people that kind of schooled me into, you know, I had the creative, but I didn't know how, you know, it was all put together. So from this previous job is where I learned how to, you know, set up photo shoots and fucking lay things out and, you know, put things out to the public that were visually, you know, working, stimulating in a different world, which was print.
Can I ask you a question though? So like it's 99, you're like in your teens. Mm-hmm. Well, no, 99, you're 29 years old.
Yeah, I was old.
The 10 years leading up to that, you got a job at as an intern at a magazine, but you're deep in the throes of bombing and graffiti.
Oh yeah.
And your friends most likely are not taking life as seriously as you are, I would imagine. And you happen to just, you stuck to this thing and you stayed there for 10 years. What was the motivation for you at that time when like you were working two full-time jobs, right? Like bombing is not something that you can do like half-ass if you do it the way you did it. So you're out all night long and then you're working all day. How did that work?
I mean, really, because that job was based upon creative, you know? So I was in this job, but it was really visual. It was working with your hands. It was at a time when there wasn't much computer. I mean, we used to sit and, you know, manually with your fucking hands and an X-Acto knife and photographs, and you would cut the person out and cut their hair, each strand of hair, and then paste onto a magazine page surrounded by type. And this was all done by hand. So it was a fucking skill that you had to learn how to lay. So that was like the art of magazine shit. It was like, you take a picture, right? You get it printed, you get the photo back. Oh shit, there's wrinkles in this shirt. You bring it to a fucking another guy, the photo retoucher. He's sitting there with a paintbrush. What do you want out? You want this wrinkle out? Okay, come back in a week. I'll have the wrinkle out. So it's the whole process of the arts, you know? So it's like, this is the fucking shit that like the kids nowadays, they don't fucking have this. They have the computer screen and fucking press a button and fucking, you know, so, but there's the knowledge of the whole game that is important, you know? So all of these years, you know, from everything from, you know, I mean, yesterday I'm doing a photo shoot. I'm still doing this shit. It's all relevant to everything I'm doing, which my shit has gotten from kind of focused, you know, it used to be magazine, now it's brand, and brand, everything goes. I fuck with music, I fuck with art, I fuck with photo shoots, I fuck with fucking, I'll do food. You wanna do a restaurant? Let's do a restaurant. Like whatever the fuck it is, there's no barriers in any of this shit, that's what keeps me.
So that's the most exciting, like, I mean, I don't want to go too far off course here because I do want to get your story because I think it's just so awesome and interesting, especially because it's like real and old school. But the brand. So you say brand, and it's like what excites you about brand is the ability to just fuck with everything, right? Like you have a dope brand that people want a piece of. You can do anything if you have the creative mind broad enough to tell a story that makes sense. And so I love that you say that, because I'm actually I'm actually launching a brand, a new brand that is going to be rooted in two different things. And some people think I'm crazy for doing it, and other people think it's brilliant. But I'm launching a brand in nutritional food products and apparel, right? So like, they're like, well, you an apparel brand? Are you a nutritional brand? I'm like, I'm a lifestyle brand. I'm launching a brand that I've got expertise in food, and I also grew up in New York City, and I love apparel. It's like
You don't even have to explain it, because I follow you on Instagram. Anybody that follows you knows that you are serious into your physical, routine, from the food to the workouts to whatever. I'm into it too, not to your extent, but like, that's the thing, is you have to live what you're fucking pushing. Otherwise you're fucking a fraud.
right.
You know what I'm saying? You're pushing so that's the beauty of like all of this shit, is that 80% of the shit out there is fraudulent. It's like people doing what they see successful, but not understanding that the success comes from, inner fucking relevance. Like
Authenticity.
the people, that's it. The people I fuck with, the brands that I fuck with that are now, the whole co-branding world, because my game has always been co-branding. But when we began, the people that I was co-branding with were people that I admired. There were brands that I admired. There were brands that I wore or fucked with or somehow were relevant to me. It wasn't because other people were doing it that I said, oh, I got to do this too. That's what's happening. That's what's been happening. And that's the beauty of this game, is because there are a bunch of fakers in this game. So I love it, because it's a, the world is your oyster. I could pick and choose. I did Crocs. Why did I do Crocs? I did Crocs because I was tired of everybody fucking wearing the same fucking sneaker every day. There's two sneakers. There's Nike and Adidas. That's it. If you don't do, if you don't have that in your arsenal, you're done. And I said, you know what? Fuck the sneaker game. I'm gonna do the fucking shoe that is taboo and nobody would fucking touch with a 10-foot pole. A Croc in the streetwear industry was like, that shit is whack, but we put it out there, and
now everybody's doing it.
Fast forward 3 years later, and Crocs, in regards to their relevance and the money that they've made, is retarded. Cut that out. But it's not, it's just crazy to see. So I think taking chances on product, and Crocs was not only because it was a fuck you to the sneaker industry, but it was because I think that the product itself was relevant. It was like a material, it was a design that nobody was using. It's like, it's so crazy in its own world that yes, they gained worldwide recognition for creating something that was like relevant, not to the fashion world yet, but it was relevant to the nurses and the people that are on their feet all day, and that was their market.
Cooking world, the restaurant, yeah.
So the ability to work with brands that have some sort of relevance, from Lee Jeans as a kid. You asked me how I grew up as a kid. I grew up as like a b-boy, basically. Lee Jeans was part of our uniform growing up. You went to the Army and Navy store. There was, 20 colors on the wall. You picked your jean, you matched it to your jean jacket. You had your Lacoste polo, like it was part of a uniform. Lee Jeans, when I dropped with Alife, it's not relevant. Nobody's selling Lee, like nobody cares about it. So a lot of the brands that I put forth, they don't get traction until a couple years later, when everybody's like, oh, you know what? We're gonna fuck with Lee now. So this all, it's all art. To me, I love watching how it all unfolds, you know? I talk a lot, so.
No, dude, this is it. Like, I love this. This is the conversation that I think is super relevant and super interesting. And, you know, brand, I think, is underestimated in a real way. I think that when entrepreneurs or creatives are thinking about something to do and they want to do something, you know, a lot of people get scared away by the typical path that say, hey, like, you know, if you're doing this, you got to sort of flow this way. You know, I had for me, it was like, when I launched my first business, people thought I was crazy for saying, hey, I'm going to do meatballs and ice cream. And people were like, what do you mean you're going to do meatballs and ice cream in a restaurant? That's it. And I was like, everybody loves meatballs and everybody loves ice cream. So I'm just going to serve those two things. Like, how could that fail? Right? We were like, what do you mean you're not going to have other? I'm like, no, this is what I'm going to do. And it worked. Right. And so I am a huge advocate for people truly, like, the authenticity is, you cannot duplicate authenticity. No matter how hard you try, you know, like, making a fake vintage t-shirt is always going to be a fake vintage t-shirt. Maybe you could get close, but no matter what, you know,
Yep.
you're wearing the fake vintage t-shirt, you know, and it's not, it doesn't feel as good as wearing the vintage t-shirt.
And I just want to throw in that, like, another thing that I think is, like, you know, part of us is, like, we're New Yorkers, and, like, I represent, or I at least try to represent the authenticity of New York, and, like, the real shit that we go through. You know, I based, our first space was based in Lower Manhattan. It was kind of like a neutral zone for all of the boroughs really to come, you know, Brooklyn, Bronx, the boroughs basically come to Manhattan. If you're from Brooklyn, you necessarily don't want to travel all the way uptown to the Bronx. You don't want, you know, so downtown became, you know, this hub of, like, just at the time, 99, it was like the creative, you know, the juices were just flowing, and it was like a multicultural melting pot. Everybody, you know, all different craze was going on. And that was, you know, that was what we harnessed, whether it was, you know, Crink making ink, you know, coming from Queens. Oh, I make this in my bathroom. Like, okay, let's package this shit up. Let's put this in the store. Oh, I make furniture. Okay, come, let's go fucking, you know, so it was all this different energy, which, like, is really the youth, which it's built upon. A lot of this stuff is, like, it's just New York energy. It's like, I want to fuck with people that have drive to do something, even if they don't even know what the fuck they're gonna do. It's like, let's, you know, so Alife was really like a workshop. And I always call it a platform, because we would like to introduce things that a lot of times would then, you know, after a while, we became a little more known, and big companies, Nikes and people would watch the people that we were putting energy into. And what would happen, you know, art curators and, like, people were watching what we were doing. And what would happen is we would say, here's an introduction, here's Espo and Reese, you know, okay, we're giving, you know, we don't have a big budget, guys, let's do a show. We do a show, we get it together for, I don't know, $1,000, $1,500. Here's our budget, let's create this show. You know, fucking 3 months later, you know, a Jeffrey Deitch fucking comes and says, hey guys, I love what you did. Let's create this show. Oh, here's the budget, it's 200,000. You know, so all of a sudden it's like, you're entering this world of, like, real business. And it's like, from the brands, from Nikes to coming to picking, you know, it's just been a very educational journey into not having a business plan, because I didn't have a business plan when we created what we did. It was very organic, and it kind of just took form as we went. But watching the way that these big corporations interact, and a lot of times they take from the culture and don't give fucking anything back, which is a fucking disgrace, but it's what they do and it's how they've become who they are, I guess. You know, when you have a lot of money, you don't have to really follow all the rules necessarily, I think. But back to New York, this is what we represent. I don't care about any fucking other country in the world. Paris, Italy, London, do your fucking thing, represent your fucking history. I don't give a shit. We're New York. We're the fucking epicenter of the fucking globe. I don't give a fuck. We do here, and it goes everywhere. That was always my thought. And it was, you know, that's all I do. I want to represent for New York. And if you're into it, love us. If not, hate us. That's it, you know?
You know, it's so funny that you say that, because like, I think when people ask me questions about my, you know, where I'm from, my childhood, or, you know, what it was like growing up in New York, you know, I know that I grew up in the cultural, even though we're newer, younger than Paris and, you know, France and Italy and Spain and, you know, Japan, and like, for whatever reason, New York City, specifically Manhattan, specifically downtown Manhattan, and probably Harlem, like really have created cultures that are as strong, if not stronger, in today's world than history, right? Like there's stuff that in the contemporary world, it starts in New York, period, done. The last 75 years, it starts in New York. And people want to emulate it, and people want to follow suit of what happens here. Why? I couldn't tell you exactly why. I don't know why there's so many creative, sort of, you know, brand focused people in New York. But, you know, it's so interesting. I never thought of graffiti as a branding and advertising, marketing, like that. It's like, that is like as real as it is. It's you know, like there were, all you saw, you know, most people for these big companies, nobody knows who's behind the companies, but they know the company's name because it's all over the place. And like, you put something on the table for me today that I have never seen. I never looked at, like, I always knew about, like, you know, there's something around graffiti that is, you know, that if you there's a mysterious sort of, like, it's like there's a feeling that it provokes in people from New York, especially from the days of when you were out there doing it. That's kind of hard to describe, but you just put a name on it for me. It's brand.
I mean, I think that, like, you know, in graffiti, the name, the ultimate ending is you're famous. Everybody knows your name, right? They know your fucking name. And that's it. You're branding your fucking name. That's all you're doing. You're putting it out there in a way that you want to portray whatever it is. And I think that's it. It's the same exact thing. And really, you know, to be successful for a brand, the more money that you have behind you and the more media you could touch, you know, TV, billboards, like, you know, clothing, the more, it's the same shit. It's bombing. It's like that energy of like putting your shit out there. So it's the same exact thing. It's just, you know, it's just money or raw, the baseline of it. So that's always been very, you know, I've always kind of felt like that. And that's why it's so easy to do the shit that we do. And I think, like, coming back to New York, like, I think because it's such a melting pot of all different people, and I think because if you don't have hustle out here, you don't survive, you know. So it's really a town full of hustlers, number one. And the evolution, the environment is constantly changing. Like right now, what we're going through with this fucking pandemic, coming out of pandemic, all the shit that's happening right now, like, this is fucking good times, bro. Like, it's crazy because yes, we have all this new shit happening, but from all of this new stuff, there's going to be a lot of new shit that's going to pop off, from, you know, the way that people interact, to the way that you go shop, to the way you go eat, to the way, all of this shit I think is going to, you know, people are going to want to party. There's going to be, I think this is when creatives start introducing new shit to the world. And I feel like we're going to have a big wave of like creativity and creatives coming out of all of this.
The big shakeup, man.
That's
I
right.
want to ask you two questions that I think are really pertinent to this convo, and then I want to get into how you start, like the launch of Alife. But culture, as far as I'm concerned, is everything, right? Culture is really, in business, if you're able to get people that work with you as excited to be a part of something, you could really sell shit to a toilet and ice to Eskimos. You know, like if they wear the jersey and drink the Kool-Aid and you guys believe it together, they're gonna wave the flag. And really, there's no, you know, they say, you know, no bad days. But when everybody's in it to win it together, like bad days are gonna come and go, but there's never like a throwing in the towel of sorts, right? When people don't believe, throwing in the towel is like the first thing that happens. You know, when people, like when the shit hits the fan and there's a bunch of people that are working at a company that they fucking hate, they're like, that's it, we're out of here. You know, but when the shit hits the fan and people are working in a company that they love, they huddle up and they say, how are we gonna fucking win? Right. And so what is culture? Because you obviously, everything about what you've done is culture focused. You know, I mean, if I wish I had video, I'm sure you do, of like what it was like when Alife first popped off. And there were people that wanted to get into Alife that would just buzz the buzzer and just would not, no one would answer. And
Right.
and I don't know how strategic that was necessarily. But like, what was it about culture that you put into that business? Was it built on culture?
Yeah, I think that it was, you know, it was the unknown of what we were doing, number one. It was, so it basically started with a space that was what we could afford, right? Which was at the time on Orchard Street. It was a cheap rent we found. It was surrounded by fabric stores that had been there for 40 years, 50 years. It's where, you know, it's a block that was not a destination for anything. It's where my parents used to go shop, to go buy a suitcase or go buy a leather jacket back when they were kids. And it's like, there was nothing there. We ended up finding a space. We came from the magazine industry. So we opened up, part of the space was a graphic design studio or a work studio that was able to generate money to pay for the space. The space, you know, was a curation of goods that became a little store. One of them was footwear, one of them was art supplies. So it was a store, studio, gallery, because we had initially started with artwork. That was one big thing. So those were the three, you know, ingredients that made us. And so art was always something big. And as I said, none of us had prior knowledge of how to operate a business of any kind. We all were just working at the time for other people. So, you know, a lot of this stuff was fly by the seat of our pants and just kind of figuring shit out. And a lot of these, you know, in reality, we lost so much fucking money because of the mistakes that we made. But it's all, you know, any mistake you make, you learn from all these experiences, and this is what makes you who you are, really. And you kind of have to have these experiences in order to, you know, understand the reality of fucking life, you know. So we didn't know. And Alife became like a foster home for kids, you know, like we would have these young kids that for some reason we liked, whether it was their attitude, whether it was like what they were doing, like creatively, whatever it was, we started becoming a clubhouse where all these people started congregating. And this congregation of people became the people we would build product with, the people that would work in the store as staff. Some of them never had a fucking job in their life. They were criminals. They were stealing fucking clothes all day and selling them, and that was their business. It's like, okay, you're gonna be our shop director, okay? You're gonna run the fucking shit. Some of them were fucking crazy, Some of them had never, we would be working upstairs, and all of a sudden, our office was upstairs, the store was downstairs. All of a sudden you hear a bunch of people screaming. You like look over the ledge, like, what are you doing? The people, like the staff is scaring the fucking customers, like just out of mental craziness. They see somebody focused and like looking at product and they think it's funny to scare the shit out of them. So like crazy, just dealing with young kids and just like, so a lot of our staff at the time was almost, it was almost like family, and it was guidance, and like Iraq, all these kids, like that was a big part of the young kids that were hanging out with us, Dash and fucking Kunle. And Kunle became employee of ours for years and years. Kunle was like our shit, and we would like give Kunle special product, and these guys would go, and all of a sudden Iraq started bubbling in New York, and it was like, where did they get these big ass fucking markers that nobody else has? And oh shit, like, it was like feeding a young Wu-Tang clan. Iraq at the time was, photographers, artists, graffiti kids, just a congregation, this young collective of kids that like were talented in all these different ways. And we fed into that, and we became, that was like our little hit squad that we would like feed, and give them press and mass appeal and put them out there. And, and you look, last week, I just did an article for fucking GQ magazine. It's like feature on Kunle. It's like, so the progression of all this shit is great to see, but it's really like, it's just who has the perseverance and the drive to keep it all going. We've known a lot of kids that have fucking passed away due to fucking, the shit that we lit New York, whatever it is. Fortunately, the ones that are still with us, a lot of them have became great, success stories. You look at yourself, you look at fucking, Ryan McGinley, you look at Dan Colin, you look at like Dash No, rest his soul, but like fucking museums. Like, these guys are some of the biggest contemporaries of our day. And it all started downtown.
What does culture mean to you? If you had to define culture, what is it?
I think it's just like the rawest form of reality. It's like, it's just we don't create it. We just include it into, we feed it, we like nurture it. And we like, I look at more of what I do as, personally, I feel like a curator. That's really my forte, is picking things that I think are relevant for whatever reason and bringing them to light, giving them some kind of a platform. So like Timberland, for instance, I just worked on a big project with Timberland, and the kid that I hired to do the whole marketing campaign had never worked for anybody in his life. It was just, he was a documentary photographer. It's like, come on, I love what you do. You're gonna now do this campaign. And like, it's putting people in these predicaments of, just giving them opportunities and really giving them freedom. And I think that's what it's good as. I'm good at picking out, different aspects of what is happening realistically in New York, and that's what's valuable. I think, like, it feeds into, you look at Virgil, that's at the top of the fashion game, Louis Vuitton creative director, but still watches all of the culture. And he basically, will feed off the culture, and then he elevates it to this whole nother level. But you know, it all starts from here, where it's like, you know, just the curation of talent and why, I think, I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it makes sense. I think it's also, you know, for me, culture, whenever I create a brand, you know, my philosophy is I'm not really selling you the product. I'm really selling you the culture. Like the product is the product that you're actually purchasing is a byproduct of the culture that we've either inherited or been part of creating, right? And I think that, you know, there's not many people are able to, you know, like I think I'm a curator as well. I think that's well put. Like, you know, and I don't know if it's being, you know, we were lucky to be born and raised in New York, right? Like that's not something that we worked for. You know what I'm saying? That's like that was just that we got lucky there, right? However, the beauty of growing up in a place like New York, you know, if you pay attention, if you don't pay attention, you could easily die, right? And it's over, and you just go through life without much. But if you pay attention in New York, you know, I remember when I was a kid, like I used to go sit in front of the Pottery Barn on Houston and Broadway when, you know, like downstairs from Radio 88 or whatever that place was. And I used to sit there and I used to just watch people. Like, it was like, I don't know, you know, like there was Astor Place. And then later on in the day, I would just go to the corner of Houston and Broadway with a bunch of kids and just sit there. And I think sitting on the corner of Houston and Broadway in the 90s in New York is like an education. You know, it's like, there was like, you know, you can't, what you see and how you absorb it and how you consume that gives you a whole platform of just exposure, you know? And so that, like, when I think of like culture, you know, learning, I don't know why I have an ability, and obviously you have an ability to know what people want before they actually want it. And then put together this cluster of things with a group of people that are carrying these things. That's just like, that shit is fire.
Yeah. I think, you know, it all comes down to personal, you know, the environment that we came up in, I think is very important to what made us, you know. I think like, definitely, you know, I remember downtown as well, you know, walking circuit down 8th Street, down, you know, all around Soho and whatnot, in a time when, you know, you had a 40 ounce, you were able to drink, you know, it was just a different time. So I think, you know, that was our era. I think, you know, we portray, I think the people that do it best are the people that take their influences and, you know, so personally, a lot of the projects that I work on a lot of them are based upon my life, you know, and what I remember, what was relevant to me. I am a big fan of nostalgia. I look back at things that were, you know, things that made me feel good. I mean, I touch upon all of that stuff, and I think like, personal experience, if you're not portraying that, you know, then what are you doing? I don't know. But I think like that's what gives the people that are doing it best are, they love what they're doing for whatever reason they're doing it. It's real content, you know. It's not like, I think that's a lot of, you know, I think that's what makes good shit. It just has to be rooted in reality, you know, in some way. I don't know if I'm explaining any of this well, but, you know, I think our environment made us.
I think the bottom line of what you're getting at and what the conversation is like, it all boils down to authenticity, right? You can't fake it. And luckily for a guy like you who grew up in, you know, in New York City, the authenticity is something that people really want to be a part of, you know. For someone that's like just starting out and just sort of thinking about trying to get to the world of entrepreneurship and creating something that people are going to want to pay attention to, do you have any advice? Would you like to say something to the, because we, you know, the people that listen to this podcast tend to be, you know, creatives, you know, people that are trying to get things off the table or already have things that are popping off and want to figure out ways to make them better. Like, what would you say?
I mean, I don't know if I'm the greatest person to give advice on this, because a lot of my shit is really, I don't put a cap on the shit that I think about. So for instance, if I'm talking to a big company, I like to shoot for the stars. I don't give a fuck about how much it's going to cost. I don't give myself any boundaries, basically. I know that if I can come up with whatever the fuck I want, it's going to make noise. And noise is what I'm good at. I think, like, I know how to do that. So I think giving yourself the ability to not be limited by boundaries, whatever they are, you know, money, whatever, because if the idea is good enough and if it means really something to you, you're going to push for it to make it happen. Like, there's fucking money in the world today, wherever it comes from. I take money from wherever I could get it, and I will turn it into some whole other shit. Like, that's my shit. Get the money, give an experience, you know, let people remember the shit, whether it's, you know, that's it, experiential for me. But that would be my one piece of advice, is like, just fucking go for it. Go for it. You have your idea. Don't be limited. If you believe in it, other people will believe in it too. And, you know, push it. And we're in a world today where marketing your shit is a whole new fucking level of, you know, I mean, social media and all this shit. And you look at all these different new, you know, TikTok and all this shit, and these 13-year-olds making fucking millions of dollars. And there's so many different venues to pump. And, you know, I'm an old school. I'm like coming from before this, even though I dabble in all of it now. But like, the new generation of kids, I think, is going to be like, I don't even know, next level. Like, we're going to see, you know, we're going to see all new shit soon. We're the dinosaurs. But
So Alife launched 99. It's now 2021. So 22 years later, how has the brand changed?
The brand has changed really not much. It's like it's constantly evolving, which it always has been, an evolution. I've lost partners. I started with 4. I'm the sole fucking, you know, the sole one left from the original crew. I've, you know, just learning business in general and how crazy it can get, and, you know, what it takes for an independent company to survive in a world of these corporate giants such as Nike and fucking Adidas, and, you know, these brands that are making mega millions of dollars, when my only fight against them is creative. So I'm basically, you know, up against these companies that have all of this power and marketing, and the one thing that we have is creative, and that's what drives our company until we get big. I don't know, which has been, you know, we're still not big. 20 something years later, we're still this you know, relatively small company, although globally known, but, you know, we're not anywhere near any of these people. So it's a weird, you know, it's a weird life. And, you know, now in my career, actually during the start of COVID, I was like, you know what, I'm going to start marketing my own shit, you know, like outside of the brand, which is now, you know, kind of on its trajectory and kind of going. I, you know, made a commitment to myself that I'm going to start pushing my own shit, which is really just art, you know, straight up art, no prior, you know, no idea where it's going to go. But the shit that I'm starting to do now is really just starting from scratch again. And it's going to be an experience and an experiment of the 20 years I've learned on how to work with companies. And, you know, what I'm going to do now is my next phase into the game. So that's been interesting. Also, it's kind of,
how can we follow along there?
I think best bet is just watch my Instagram, and because it's very organic once again, although I know how to maneuver and how to get the money a little better and how to kind of like, you know, pump my shit. So it's really just the evolution of all of this, you know, learning over the past years. And I don't know where it's going to go other than it's going to be kind of raw, uncut shit. That's it. So
I've got a few more questions and then I'm gonna let you go, man. You know, you got to give us a good story, a good story from the old days that'll give people a little glimpse into what it was like running around New York in the 80s and early 90s.
Graffiti wise,
yeah, graffiti or anything that just is a good representation of what it was like then.
geez, I mean, I don't know. We used to go to nightclubs back in the day. One in particular that I used to frequent at a certain time was Roseland, which was a big ballroom, but back in the day, it was like the hip hop fucking World Series, you know, it was the, you know, it was where I met, you know, my ex-girlfriend at the time, a Dominican girl from Queens that, you know, it was just one of the, you know, it was one of the clubs that was just my growing up and my era. It's where all the, you know, people that I was hanging out with went. It was where I met some of my greatest friends. It was, you know, it was a hip hop, you know, reggae craziness. And it was, you know, it was just an era of New York that I'll always remember, you know, going to the clubs. We were doing all sorts of crazy drugs at the time, from smoking dust to fucking weed to, you know, and you'd be in the club not knowing what the hell's going on. And it was that, you know, it was kind of a violent time, I feel like, back then. It was really a little different. Like your crew was your gang almost, you know. You would step into a place, you would go to a club, you would roll to a club with 20 people, you know, you'd be like this posse that was, you know, a force to be, you know, it was just a different time. You'd leave the club, you'd fucking come downtown, you'd hang out in front of McDonald's, you'd get more fucked up, you'd walk around the village, you know. So it was just, you know, the experiences of, you know, this era, which definitely have made us all. And, you know, I don't even know, you know, I am thankful to still be alive, number one, with some of the craziness that we've been through. You know, I think I thank God that, you know, for giving me the ability to navigate through some tough times and, you know, stick with it and be here today and be like, you know, my mindset is like, I'm a fucking nice person now. I try to give back, you know, I try to give help whenever I can. Whereas when you're a kid, you don't give a shit. You're a dumb kid. You're like, you know, but you have to go through these things to kind of like realize yourself. So I'm just I thank God. I try to take care of myself now. I see you take care of yourself like crazy. I think like we learn, you know, what makes ourselves happy. I think health, happiness, you know, excluding all bad vibes is always great. And, you know, that's it. Positivity, baby.
Yeah. Rob, I ask everyone that's on the show, do you think you were born to crush it the way you have, or do you think you were made over time?
Oof. I mean, I was born for this shit because nobody fucks with me. Like I know what I'm doing. I don't really get scared about any of this shit. I think I was born into this, but along the way, boy, I've been made into a beast. Like, I know what I'm doing. Don't fuck with me. Like, that's it.
Dude, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. This is perfect. Exactly an hour. You're the man. I think that this is going to be one of those shows that people love listening to because it's as real as it gets. You know, I think your story is authentic. And, you know, if there are people out there, including myself, who's launching a brand in apparel, I'm inspired by Alife, man. You know, Alife was the first brand that really, I think, I paid attention to when it came to like New York City downtown subculture, doing some shit that was exciting, that wasn't skateboarding. And you did it, homie. And
hopefully I didn't talk fucking people to sleep, but you know, I'm glad. I don't even know how we reconnected, but I'm inspired by everything that you do. Something that you did just the other day with your walk, which is that a new thing, your walks at 4:30 or whatever?
Walk at 4:30 has been a game changer for me, man. You know, because I'm upstate. So I moved out of the city for the year in March when the pandemic hit, and I've been upstate at our house upstate. And at 4:30 every day, it's part of my routine. I go out and I walk for like 4 or 5 miles, and it's changed the game. It just gives me, you know.
That I saw you doing. I think we didn't touch upon it at all, but like nature for me, I too have a house upstate in the mountains. Like that is my hideout. That's my bat cave. I'm up there. That's what I love. But your walks, you know, and I think like that's very important. Like to me anyway, like I went through kind of a fucking personal craze this year, and I was like kind of like, usually I'm pretty chill mentally, and I'm pretty passive, and I know how to mellow myself out. But I kind of had an experience with some personal shit this year, and I walked it out, and I kind of started a walk, and I walked 8 miles a day, and it became a walk run later on, but it started as a walk, and it was really the only time that kind of like grounded me and kind of like gave me a chance to like think and reset. And it's just, you know, meditative experience. And it was great. And it kind of like, when you put that up, I was like, you know, that's exactly it. It's like you have this little alone time, you get your phone calls done, you do these things where you're uninterrupted. And I think like, you know, figuring out how to balance your mental, because the work that we're in, New York City business, nonstop, like you need that nature, you need that fresh air, you need that like downtime. So I think that's also important, and we didn't touch upon that, but like,
I mean, we're touching on it now, and I figure we might as well just, you know, like I gotta say that, you know, I was thinking about doing something in the beginning of the pandemic because so many people were staying inside and staying at home and not really getting out and moving around. And so I came up with this idea called the Move Movement, because moving for me, like getting out and doing that walking is underrated, man. It just is. Like in the world of fitness, everybody's like, oh, you got to run, you got to bike, you got to swim, you got to fit, you got to lift weights, you got to kickbox, you got to box. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, that's all good. But the truth is that nobody's talking about like getting out and walking. And walking outside for an hour and a half straight changed my life.
Mental or physical?
Both. The mental for me is like, if I need to think about something, and I've always used this movement as like my way of getting through shit, but like for years, if I really needed to think through something, or if I was bubbling up on a new idea, new concept, whatever, and I wanted to actually get some shit done, I would go out for a run, no music, and I would just go. And I wouldn't put any boundaries on it. If it was a 2-mile run or a 10-mile run, no matter what, as long as I didn't have headphones on and I wasn't listening to something or taking phone calls, if I needed to get something done, or if I need to think through something, that is how I do it. And that's how I do it today too. If I'm like, if there's something bubbling and I really need to get to a turning point or a decision on a project or an idea within a project, I go out and I walk without headphones. And it forces me to actually be in my head and think. And
that just like, I just brought that up because when I saw you doing it, I was like, that's like 100% like just it's a good thing to have as part of your daily, like shit. So
yo, dude, I really appreciate you, man. And where can people find you? Where can people follow along? What's your Instagram?
Instagram R0B1970.
R0B1970, and Alife is at Alife,
New York. That's the one.
New York.
Behind the legends.
You're a fucking legend.
Thank you for having me, and let's get up soon.
Yeah, dude. Thanks, Holmes.
Thanks, brother.